Hello, friends, and welcome back to Boss Economic World. The place where we slice through the jargon, dump the official talking points in the recycling bin, and figure out what's really going on with our money and our world. Today is November 17th, 2025. It's been just over a year since the world woke up to the news of Donald Trump's return to the White House. Remember that day? The markets went on a roller coaster ride that would make a professional astronaut nauseous. Well, the initial shock has passed, the victory parades are over, and the Liberation Day tweets have become a part of our daily news diet once again. Now, the real work begins. Or rather, the real hangover begins. Because when you throw a political party that big, the global economy is bound to wake up the next morning with a splitting headache, a mysterious new tattoo, and an empty wallet. So today, we're going to be the world's designated driver. We're going to check in on everyone, from Brussels to Beijing, from Washington to Sao Paulo, and see who's chugging coffee and trying to piece together what happened, and who's secretly popping champagne in the backroom. Let's peel back the onion on the post-election world economy. Let's start in Europe. The European Union. You have to give them credit, they thought they were ready this time. They spent 4 years Trump-proofing their supply chains, talking big about strategic autonomy, and practicing their deep breathing exercises. They were like a student who studied all night for the final exam, only to find out the professor changed all the questions at the last minute. This coming week, the bigwigs in Brussels are set to release their new economic forecasts, and let's just say the mood isn't exactly ode to joy. They're about to take a red pen to their growth forecasts for 2026, and the reason has a very familiar, very gold-plated name written all over it. You see, after winning, President Trump didn't waste any time. He hit Europe with his signature move, the market-jolting tariff announcement. He called it Liberation Day, a day to liberate American industry. For Europe, it felt more like Eviction Day. The initial threat was a blanket 25% tariff on everything from French cheese to German cars. Chaos ensued. Then came the classic Trump pivot. After dangling the sword over their heads, he offered a deal. The EU, desperate to avoid the worst-case scenario, rushed to the negotiating table. In the end, they clinched a deal in July. And what a deal it was! They ended up swallowing a 15% tariff on most of their goods. In diplomatic terms, that's like getting mugged, and then thanking the mugger for letting you keep your socks. The immediate fallout for 2025 wasn't as catastrophic as feared. The European Commission is actually likely to raise its 2025 growth estimate from the predicted 0.9%. Why? Because businesses front-loaded everything. They rushed to ship goods before the tariffs fully kicked in, creating a temporary, artificial sugar rush. It's like chugging 5 energy drinks, you feel amazing for an hour, but the crash is inevitable. And the crash is coming in 2026. The original hope for a mild pickup to 1.4% growth is now a pipe dream. The European Central Bank, those perpetually gloomy folks in Frankfurt, are already penciling in a measly 1% growth. They put it in their usual dry central banker language, still elevated uncertainty, higher effective tariffs, a stronger euro. Let me translate that for you. Our businesses are scared, everything we sell to our biggest customer just got 15% more expensive, and our own currency is getting stronger, which is like running a race with a weighted vest on. But it's not just Trump. Europe has its own self-inflicted wounds. Let's look at Germany. The mighty engine of Europe. For years, if the EU was a car, Germany was the perfectly engineered V12 engine. Now, the check engine light is flashing, and there's a strange noise coming from under the hood. They've been on a spending binge, throwing money at defense and infrastructure. But even that isn't enough. The government's own wise men, the Council of Economic Experts, have downgraded their 2026 growth outlook to below 1%. Why? Because when you're an export powerhouse and the whole world is tiptoeing around a trade war, it doesn't matter how great your factories are. Your customers are hiding under their desks. Then there's France. If Germany is the stoic engineer, France is the passionate, dramatic artist. And right now, its drama is off the charts. Political instability and budget battles are a constant feature. The Bank of France estimates this domestic chaos is shaving 0.5 percentage points off growth. Think about that. That's a direct, quantifiable cost of political bickering. It's like a family business where the owners spend so much time yelling at each other that they forget to open the store. In fact, France is on track to have the worst budget deficit in the entire EU. But wait. There's a plot twist. A bright spot in this gloomy European saga. And it comes from the most unlikely of places, Italy. Yes, Italy. The country that for decades was the poster child for fiscal irresponsibility. They've actually managed to get their deficit down to the EU's 3% limit faster than anyone expected. They did their homework, tidied their room, and might even get an upgrade from Moody's. It's the ultimate told-you-so moment for Rome, and a sign that maybe, just maybe, some lessons have been learned. Now, let's cross the Atlantic to the source of all this commotion, the United States. You'd think the US economy would be booming, right? Liberation Day and all that. Well, it's complicated. The US is currently like a pilot trying to fly a 747 through a thunderstorm with all the instruments turned off. Why? Because of the longest government shutdown in U.S. history that ended just a few days ago. The number crunchers at the Bureau of Labor Statistics and the Census Bureau were sent home for weeks. Now they're back, trying to piece together data that is weeks, even months, out of date. The September jobs report is only coming out this Thursday. We're in mid-November. That's not economic data, it's economic history. This data blackout has one major consequence: it has completely paralyzed the Federal Reserve. Fed Chair Jerome Powell and his team are supposed to be the master pilots of the economy, using interest rates to navigate inflation and unemployment. But without reliable data on jobs or inflation for October, they're flying blind. This is why you've heard a chorus of Fed officials lately saying they should hold rates steady. It's not because the economy is perfect, it's because they have no idea what the economy is doing. When the minutes from their October meeting are released this Wednesday, expect to read a masterclass in bureaucratic hedging. On the one hand, on the other hand, we will remain data dependent. And what about the average American? Private sector data gives us a clue. On Thursday, we'll see October home sales. The forecast? Flat. No change. The great American housing market is in a staring contest. Sellers don't want to lower their prices, but with interest rates still high, buyers can't afford them. It's a market frozen by a lack of affordability, a direct consequence of the Fed's earlier war on inflation. And let's not forget the neighbor upstairs, Canada. They are watching the chaos in the US with a very nervous smile. Their own inflation is stubbornly above the 2% target. Prime Minister Mark Carney is trying to pass a big spending budget, but his hold on Parliament is razor thin. Canada is trying to run its own race, but its feet are tied to the American economy. Every time the US sneezes from trade war fever, Canada catches a cold. The ripples from the West are creating waves, and in some cases tsunamis, across Asia. It's a real mixed bag over there. Let's start with Japan. For decades, Japan has been the land of economic zombification: no growth, no inflation. Well, be careful what you wish for. Data this week is expected to show the Japanese economy shrank at an annualized pace of 2.4% in the third quarter. A contraction. This is a massive shock. But in the strange world of politics, a crisis is an opportunity. This terrible number gives Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi, a known hawk, all the political ammunition she needs to do something she's been itching to do: unleash an outsized stimulus package. She can now stand up and say, "Look at this disaster. We must spend." It's not for politics, it's for the people. It's a classic move. And here's the ultimate irony. At the same time the economy is shrinking, Japan's inflation is finally staying at or above the central bank's 2% target. For 43 straight months. After 30 years of trying to create inflation with bizarre experiments, they finally got it, partly thanks to global supply chain chaos. This puts the Bank of Japan in a bizarre position. Do they raise rates to fight inflation, or keep them low to fight the recession? It's a monetary policy nightmare. Meanwhile, other parts of Asia are feeling the direct heat. Thailand, a country reliant on tourism and exports, is slowing down. Sagging tourism numbers and US tariffs are hitting them hard. But then, there's the elephant in the room. Or rather, the dragon. China. What's Beijing doing amidst all this chaos? The official news is that they will likely hold their loan prime rate steady on Thursday. Boring, right? Wrong. This is the most boss economic world thing ever. While the West is loud, chaotic, and tweeting its every move, China is playing a game of silent, strategic go. They see the US and Europe locked in a messy trade dispute. They see their regional rivals like Japan and Thailand struggling. What do? They project stability. They keep their rates steady. They focus on their domestic economy. They are positioning themselves not as a participant in the chaos, but as the stable anchor in a stormy sea. While Trump is playing checkers, trying to take his opponent's pieces, China is playing a 100-year game of chess, controlling the board. And don't forget India. PMI data suggests its manufacturing sector is humming along. As Western companies desperately search for a China plus one strategy to diversify their supply chains away from the line of fire, India is there with its hand up, saying, "Pick me. Pick me." The story doesn't end there. Let's do a quick lightning round of the other key players. Switzerland, the ultimate suffering from success story. In a world of uncertainty, everyone flees to the Swiss franc as a safe haven. This has caused the franc to surge to a decade high against the euro. Sounds great, right? Wrong. If you're a Swiss company trying to sell a Rolex or a dose of medicine, your products just became insanely expensive for your biggest customers in Europe. To make matters worse, Trump, in a move that felt almost personal, slapped a staggering 39% tariff on Swiss goods earlier. The result? The Swiss economy probably shrank in the third quarter. They are the responsible, quiet student who gets punished just for sitting next to the class troublemaker. United Kingdom, still navigating the treacherous waters of its post-Brexit, post-Liz Truss reality. The good news? Inflation is expected to weaken to 3.5%. The fever might be breaking. But the economy is weak, and all eyes are on Chancellor Rachel Reeves's budget announcement on November 26. She has to perform a miracle, support the economy without spooking the markets that still have PTSD from the last time the UK government tried a radical budget. Emerging markets, here's where you see the global transmission mechanism in full effect. With the global economy slowing, countries like South Africa and Egypt are expected to cut interest rates this week. They need to stimulate their own economies to offset the weak global demand. But it's a tightrope walk. Egypt, for example, is seeing rents jump, which is pushing inflation back up. And finally, let's look south to Latin America. Brazil, the region's powerhouse, is in trouble. After a fantastic run of 16 straight quarters of growth, the party appears to be over. Analysts are whispering to our word, a technical recession in the second half of 2025. Tight money and slowing public spending are biting hard. Mexico, on the other hand, is trying to thread the needle. They've been cutting rates to support their economy, which is heavily dependent on the US. But their central bank is getting nervous, signaling they might pause soon. They are trying to surf the giant waves created by their northern neighbor without getting wiped out. So, let's zoom out. What is the real story, the full picture, 1 year into Trump 2.0? The headlines are about tariffs. The 15% on EU goods, the 39% on Swiss goods. But that's not the real story. The real story, the real poison seeping into the global economic well, is uncertainty. It's the German factory owner who doesn't invest in a new assembly line because he's afraid of the next late-night tweet announcing tariffs on his cars. It's the French CEO who puts hiring on hold because she doesn't know if the government will even exist in 6 months. It's the Federal Reserve, unable to make a decision because the very data it relies on has become unreliable. In this environment, Europe is struggling to find its footing, caught between external pressure and internal divisions. The US is a giant, powerful engine, but the driver is blindfolded. Asia is a complex tapestry of victims, opportunists, and silent strategists. And emerging markets are bracing for the impact of the slowdown. In the chaotic global chess game of 2025, the biggest risk isn't making the wrong move. It's playing on a board where one of the players keeps threatening to flip the table over just to see what happens. And as we've seen today, the whole world is holding its breath, waiting for the next move. That's all the time we have for today. We'll be here to decipher the next chapter for you. What do you think is the biggest risk? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, stay sharp, stay informed, and don't forget to smash that like and subscribe button. This is Boss Economic World, signing off.